Good evening, friends. Today we will be discussing euthanasia. Euthanasia sometimes also is called mercy killing, right? And it has a lot of names and a lot of classifications, and there is a considerable amount of debate which is going on whether euthanasia should be legalized or whether euthanasia should not be legalized. Countries which has the provision for euthanasia even debate whether it should be illegalized. That means that whether it should be taken out of the legal code. Similarly, countries which do not have euthanasia, they also argue that they should have the provision of euthanasia in their country. So, what is this debate all about, and how we can understand the debate, and what are the key points which are there to be understood, is something which we will be deliberating in this video. Okay, so our discussion today is on euthanasia, right? So we will be discussing that what is there to debate, right? Because since we know that there is so much of discussion which goes on in this concept of euthanasia, so what is it which we need to debate upon, or what is there to debate, right? So that has to be very clear in our mind, rather than that what are the rules and regulations in different countries, and what are the statistics and so on. Those things are secondary, rather than we should be more interested in discussing that what is there to debate in this thing, and especially from a philosophical point of view. So we start the discussion with a dilemma, and let us construct this dilemma even if it is not a constructive dilemma. What it says is that euthanasia concerns death. Now, this is a factually true statement that euthanasia definitely concerns death. It is related to death. So, there is absolutely no question about it that it is a false statement. It is a true statement. The second thing is euthanasia is intrinsically good, because there is somewhere down the line we have this idea that if we have to discuss euthanasia, there is something intrinsically good about it. What is that intrinsically good about it? Is that we relieve someone from an indomitable or intolerable pain, because somebody who is awarded euthanasia or is permitted euthanasia is actually in deep pain, right? Or is in a vegetative state, or is in coma, and there is absolutely no way in which this person can get normal, or even half of what we call normal, or even one quarter of what we call normal. So, given that we say that, okay, there is something intrinsically good about it, and that is to relieve somebody from the pain which he or she is going through. Now, the third statement, death is intrinsically bad. This is also a true statement, because somewhere down the line again, we think that death is associated with something which is the end of the road, and we should never be at the end of the road, rather than we should travel as much as we can. And death is something which we neither want to pronounce for somebody, or is not something which we will like to embrace for ourselves, right? So there is something intrinsically bad about death, or something, at least we see it from this perspective, that death is not something good. We should always try to continue, right? So this is another thing which is there in the mind. And if you see the first three statements, then we come with this last statement, which can be called as a statement, or which should be called as a conclusion. And what is it? That there is something intrinsically good in something that is intrinsically bad. Now, this is a very rigorous question, or this is something which is a important, which is an important question for us. That what is it which makes euthanasia intrinsically good, death intrinsically bad? And when we talk about euthanasia, so it is that there is something intrinsically good about it, or else why we will call it mercy killing, right? Because there is something mercy also associated with that killing, right? So, given all that, this becomes a very important and interesting question for us to discuss, that what is it which makes it something intrinsically good and something intrinsically bad, right? Now, let us come to the classification of euthanasia. that what is or what how many ways, but six ways at least, in which you will find in standard literature that euthanasia is classified. First is voluntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia precisely means that I want to die and I cannot die alone. That means that I cannot commit suicide because my stage is, or my state is so bad, but at least I can wish for, I can will for, and I have some problems in my body, and that is incurable or something. I wish that I should be provided with euthanasia. So that is the thing which we call as voluntary euthanasia. When X is a person and X wishes that he or she should be provided with uh, euthanasia. Then there can be non-voluntary euthanasia. That means that I'm not in a position to say, because I'm in a coma or I'm in a state where I cannot wish and will, but on my behalf, somebody who is competent enough, like my son, my daughter, my wife, or somebody who knows me, who's a friend of mine, and who has the right to take a decision, is wishing or willing to provide euthanasia, right? So it can be the doctor even, because if the doctor or the person in the medical profession also understands that what is my situation, and since I cannot wish or will for, so given that mm, I on my behalf, if suppose somebody is taking a decision, so that will be called as non-voluntary euthanasia. Then there is something, a very controversial type of euthanasia, I will say, is like the involuntary euthanasia. Now, why I'm calling it controversial? Because involuntary euthanasia is like that I was not asked whether I will like to die or not, or I did not say it, or I wanted to live, but my stage is not good enough, and there is no chance that I will be normal. And even if I do not wish for, or I do not will for, but the doctor or the person who is competent enough thinks this person should be given euthanasia, or this person should be provided euthanasia. So because of that, I am provided with euthanasia. It is called as an involuntary euthanasia. But again, try to understand that even if it is controversial and very few times that it is used, but many a times the decision is right as well. There is absolutely no doubt about it. So that is also something which we should understand. But anyways, we will come to these discussions a little bit later in the slides. Then active euthanasia. Active euthanasia precisely means that like suppose I'm on life support, and some lethal injection or something which has been put in my body, and because of that I die. It is usually by a medical professional, by a doctor, but then the decision is there because they think that this person has absolutely no way in which he or she could recover. So because of that, this person can be provided with some kind of injection, some kind of pills, some kind of stuff which will eventually kill this person. Then there is something called passive euthanasia. Now, passive euthanasia is something which has been also accepted, or is something where ruling has come out of, from the Supreme Court of India as well. Now, what is passive euthanasia? Passive euthanasia is like that I'm on life support. And absolutely, there is no way that I can be this. I can. I can be cured, right? And I, in my will, in my say legal will, have written that if I ever reach a situation like this, so I should be provided with euthanasia. So with the will, if in the will it is there, and I reach a state like that, so and I wish that I should be provided with euthanasia, so I can be given. And in that, what happens is that whatever life support I have is something which is taken off, right? So after some time I will die. So that is one of the ways. In fact, there is another way, and that is like that not only life support will be taken off, but also it can happen that I am given some drug overdose, or even if the drugs which are given to administered, the administered drugs which were given for my betterment or for my living, uh, after some point of the time are actually turning fatal, and the doctor has not stopped it. So, because of that, also it will be called as passive euthanasia. So that is one of the things. And some people also, or in literature, we will also find something called assisted suicide. So assisted suicide precisely means that I am unable to, and it can, this classification of euthanasia are not like disjoint sets. There is a considerable amount of overlap between some of them. So assisted suicide will be like that I am unable to commit suicide, or I am unable to die, and I ask for help from somebody, that please provide me death, or please provide me euthanasia. That person can be a doctor, that person can be my friend, my son, my daughter, my wife, my mother, my father, anybody who is competent enough, and whom I have asked for that please kill me because I'm not able to live, or I do not want to live, and I cannot take my life as well. So that will be understood as assisted suicide. So they differentiate it from the others. But as I told you, that these are not disjoint understandings. There is considerable overlap between these kind of deaths. Anyways, let us move further and go to a safe definition. So, what will be a safe definition for euthanasia? A safe definition for euthanasia will be that it is a medical or doctor assisted killing. Now, can we use this word killing? Because killing word is not understood as a very appropriate word, right? So you can call it medical or assisted death. Hmm. So, death will be an even better and more appropriate way of using a safe definition. So, we can call it like it is medical or doctor assisted death. So, that will be the best. I guess so. The safe, if we call it a safe definition, so it will be a doctor assisted death or a medical assisted death, right? So this will be a safe definition of euthanasia, and this is something which we should keep in mind. Okay, now let us try to understand the preconditions of voluntary euthanasia, because most of the countries in this world, like Belgium or Luxembourg or Netherlands, and some states of United States of America, you will find that voluntary euthanasia is more prevalent over there, right? So, what is voluntary euthanasia? You know now. So, what are the preconditions of voluntary euthanasia? So the first thing is that the person is suffering from terminal illness. That means that there is this illness is something which is not going to be right. So that is something which we understand. Second, that the person is unlikely to benefit from the discovery of a cure for that illness during what remains of his or her life expectancy. Like even if there are researches going on for this disease or that disease, but the person who is terminally ill is not having much of life left, and whatever discovery or inventions which are going on, it is very unlikely that that kind of discovery or invention is going to help this person. So this is another precondition. Then third, that the person is, as a direct result of the illness, either suffering intolerable pain or only has available a life that is unacceptably burdensome. Example, because the illness has to be treated in ways that lead to her or his being unacceptably dependent on others or on technological means of life support. So you can see the vegetative condition of the person as well as the intolerable pain of that person. So this is also a condition which should be sufficed, or which should be satisfied before people can think of providing somebody with euthanasia. Then D, has an enduring, voluntary, and competent wish to die. Now, these three things are very important. First word is enduring. That means it is going to last forever. It's not going to change. Second, voluntary. That this decision is not made by somebody else, but rather that person. And third, competent wish. That means that that person must be in proper mental health or something like that, because then only a person can make a competent wish, right? Because if you are not in a proper medical and mental state, then you may not be able to take proper decision, right? So, or has prior to losing the competence to do so expressed a wish to be assisted to die in the event that conditions A to C are satisfied. Like I told you about the passive euthanasia, right? In India, if suppose I have written like a will, a legal will, where I have said that suppose if I meet with an accident, or if I am in a vegetative state because of illness or any disease, and I reach a state where I am unable to come back to normalcy, and I wish for death, so I should be given death. So if I have written this in my will, if I have it in my legal will, so passive euthanasia can be administered. So similarly, if you see it here, that the person has, suppose the person has lost his or her competence of taking a decision like that. So even in that condition, or even in that state, if the person before losing his or her competence has wished for like that, suppose there is some document evidence or some documentary evidence which can be taken for this consideration, so in that case also a person can be administered euthanasia. And last is unable without assistance to end her life. That means that this person is not able to take his life or her life, right? Because the person is not in a state to kill himself or herself. So, given those all or these all understandings, a person can be provided with euthanasia, and this is only the conditions of voluntary euthanasia. Okay, now let me, before start the arguments for and against it, a word of caution as well as a disclaimer. The word of caution is that the arguments are going to be very strong, both for and against it. And please do not mind it. Please do not take it on your heart or on your mind in such a way that it affects you. Second, it can have some, I will say, inconvenient things, right? So those inconvenient things also should be tackled in a very strong fashion. And I do not subscribe to any of these opinions is also something which should be very clear in your mind, because or else I have seen by my past experiences that whenever I say to my students that okay, this is what is right or this is what is wrong or something like that, so people tend to follow what is right and tend to not follow what is right, and so on. So that should not be the case. The arguments are very strong on both the sides, and I will try my best to provide you or both the sides and their arguments in the least possible biased way. Okay, so here are the arguments for euthanasia. First, there must be a freedom of choice to an individual, right? Every person should have a freedom of choice. So the freedom of living and the freedom of dying, both are there with the person, because it has to become a human right that if I have an enduring wish to die, I should be given. Like you must be knowing that suicide has now suicide was illegal, right? And there was a penalty for suicide. The anecdote goes like that, that at some point of the time in some country, I will not like to name it, you can search it on the internet, that if you try to commit suicide and you somehow could not commit suicide, then you will be awarded death penalty, because attempt to suicide was punishable by law with death. So in either way, you are a winner, right? But suicide has been now made, or it has been decriminalized. Why? Because somewhere people have understood that if somebody wants to die, then that person cannot be punished by law, right? So it is his or her enduring wish, and if that person wants to die, then there is nothing which can stop. So, given that understanding, the freedom of choice to live as well as to die remains with you, or stays with you forever. So, this is one of the things. Second, quality of life is a very important thing. If you are in a vegetative state, if you are in a state which is full of misery, and you are completely dependent on somebody, so you yourself start feeling that this is not a life worth living, and this is not the quality of life which I ever thought for or which I wanted to live. So, given that, also people will say that. Since I have lost the quality of life to which I used to ponder upon or which I used to subscribe, I will not like to live anymore. Similarly, dignity of life is there, and this dignity of life is also beyond life. That means that if I have an enduring wish to live and live in such a way with dignity, so I want to die also with dignity. I do not want to die as an animal or as anything on this earth which is miserable, right? So if my dignity is lost, right? So by living, so I will like to end my life. So this is another argument which is given and which is a very strong argument as well. Then you might be knowing that we have scarce resources from a medical point of view, because you might be knowing that COVID became a pandemic precisely because we do not have enough of ventilators or respirators, which people may require. And because of that, we needed social distancing, we needed lockdowns, and we needed mm, so many things more precisely to contain, because if the situation get adverse, then people will die on the road and they will not be able to, or there will be no support for them. So given that, you understand that there is always scarce resources, especially from a medical point of view, and a lot of resources are put to save a person who is in a vegetative state. So even if he is staying or living, but it is actually using up a lot of resources which can be used for some other people who are not in a vegetative state, and because of them these people are also suffering, right? So this is one of the arguments from an economic point of view which is also provided, that since we have scarce resources, and these resources can be shifted or can be channelized to some other directions, so that it can be used in a better fashion, or it can be used on those people who are who can live and who can be cured easily. So why not divert those resources from these people, where there is absolutely no chance that they will continue. Then you also need to understand one thing, that it is not only the suffering of the person, it is also the suffering of the people who are attending or her, because the family is the worst affected, is the worst affected, because the quality of life they, or the things they go through in those days when a person is bedridden, or is in a completely vegetative state, or is in coma, or is not able to live, and it's completely on life support system, and so on. So if you imagine the situation of that person, like if you are a son or a daughter and your parent or somebody is in such a state, so every day for you is worth dying, right? And you are dying every day even if you are living, and you know that there is absolutely no way in which this person will come back to normalcy. So from a human rights perspective, you also see that it is not only the suffering of one person, but the suffering of the whole of the family, which is a very painful affair. So in that case also, people will say that this kind of situation is completely unsustainable, and therefore we need to provide somebody with a thing. And moreover, it is natural. It is natural because it is natural, and it happens in many places and many times, that if a thing has stopped working, or if a person um, is not in his or her personhood, so that person is left to die. That is also a very natural thing. Like naturally, what happens is that a person has completed his or her life cycle, right? So his body is not able to work anymore, and that person dies naturally. So similarly, a person who has reached a situation from where There is only decaying, and you do not know when that person is dying, or that person is going to face intolerable pain for such a long time, and then eventually that person will die, and there is absolutely no way out that the person can come back. So given that stage, it is very natural for a person to wish for dying at that very moment rather than living the whole moment and suffer. So therefore given in favor of euthanasia, and they are very strong arguments from the point of view. And therefore, as I told you, that many countries have actually legalized euthanasia under certain conditions. Now, let us move forward and go for the arguments which are against euthanasia. So now the first thing is that you might be knowing about the Hippocratic Oath. Now the Hippocratic Oath is taken by the doctors, and the doctors themselves say that we cannot administer the death of a person, right? We are here to give life to people or to make them live. We are not going to kill. So neither we will perform something nor we will let anybody perform something, right? To kill a person. So that is the doctor's dilemma. You can call it, or you can call it a Hippocratic Oath, right? That I am under oath, and therefore I cannot kill a person, right? Similarly, medicines and palliative care. You need to understand the value of medicines and palliative care. Now, what is the biggest argument against euthanasia? The biggest argument against euthanasia is that somebody is suffering from intolerable pain. But there are medicines which can reduce the pain, and which, in fact, completely removes the pain. Right. Similarly, palliative care, if there are proper care and mechanism which is provided, so absolutely there is no problem that that person that argument intolerable pain is taken care of, right? So third, that there are a lot of moral and religious sentiments which are associated with this, that we should not provide euthanasia to people, right? Because the world is and the life is worth living, and in fact taking away the life of yourself or of somebody else is considered as a sin in many cultures. And it is also understood from a moral point of view that, say, if anybody reaches a vegetative state, so whether you should give euthanasia to that person because that person is in vegetative state, so or some person is in intolerable pain, or something like that, so that will reduce the half of the population, and especially it will be very unjustified on elderly population, right? So that can also happen. And then the patient's competence. When we talk about the patient's competence, that this person or that person is having the competence to think. So people who are in pain do not have a very competent mind to decide, because we accuse somebody, we want to hit somebody, we want to take our own lives and this and that. But at the next moment, when that pain is gone, that anger is gone, we say, "Oh God, what I was doing, I was so wrong," and stuff like that. So the patient's competence is something which is always questionable. Then there is a guilt or a burden, right? Because why people want to end their lives when they see their sons and daughters getting grilled every day? That is the truth. And they feel like that, okay, because of me, my son is suffering, my wife is suffering, my daughter is suffering so much, my family members are getting hurt every day, or they are in intolerable pain rather than I am in, and there is no end to it, so I should die. So that guilt and burden makes the person decide that, okay, I should end my life. And this is another questionable thing. And last but not the least, people, when they are in some kind of illness, right, they also develop some kind of mental illness, or they go through depression. And because of that, even if they are making a wish that I want to die, or even if a person who is competent, like my father is bedridden and on deathbed, and I want, and I have reached a state of depression that, okay, I cannot see this anymore. and I want this person to die. So even if I'm a competent person, and the way I'm deciding is precisely because of some kind of mental imbalance or depression. So given those cases, also you will see that this wish or will is something which can be questioned always and every time. There is more to it. There is more to it. Let us try to understand. First, it's never an enduring wish. As I told you, and as I said in the last slide as well, that a wish is not an enduring wish. It can change at any point of time. Even if you feel like that it's an enduring wish that, yes, I want to die, the moment just before the death, a person says, no, I do not want to die. Please do not kill me. But by that time, it is too late. It is too late, and you cannot revert, right? Similarly, there is a chance of misuse. Every son who is greedy, every daughter who is greedy, every wife who is greedy, every husband who is greedy, and there is a chance that once this old man or old woman dies, I will inherit so much of money, or the doctor has been bribed and the doctor says that this person's state is a vegetative state and there is no chance that he or she will come back to normalcy, even if he or she can come back to normalcy. So this misuse cannot be checked, right? Then if you start going on a killing spree, then you do not value life. Try to understand life is there for preservation and life has to be preserved. So, no matter what we try and we endeavor, um, we do our best to save a life. We do not want to kill somebody. Neither we want to kill somebody else, neither we want to kill ourselves. Right? And last but not the least, but I will not get into this. This is basically like once you start with voluntary euthanasia, which has already started in most of the countries where euthanasia is permitted, then it opens the argument for involuntary euthanasia, non-voluntary euthanasia, and everything which surrounds that. And that is what we call as a slippery slope argument. But as I know that many of the students of this class have no idea about fallacies and also do not know about slippery slope argument or the slippery slope fallacy. So I will not delve more over on this slide as well as on this lecture. But once we will be meeting in the class, we will be discussing more about it. But the thing is that once you have put your foot on voluntary euthanasia and you allow it, then there is no stopping and there is no coming back. Then you will have to start with involuntary euthanasia. You have to start with non-voluntary and every other thing which is associated, including assisted suicides. So, given that this is these are the arguments which are given by those people who are against euthanasia, that we can never legalize euthanasia. Okay, so let us discuss, and I open this platform for discussion now. And I will not bore you much with the my discussions and this and that in this presentation and this video, but we will be discussing more in the class. But let me tell you a few things which you should ponder upon before you discuss euthanasia. First thing, whether death is a bad thing. Now, this is the first question which you should understand. The second question, uh, is there a merit which is associated with the death penalty? Because this is another thing which we should always be, because when we started the presentation, so we said that death is a bad thing and euthanasia is a good thing. Now, the important question is that whether death is a bad thing. This is the first question. And the second question will be that whether there is any merit associated with uh, euthanasia. I may tell you a few things which I have seen. I have also shared a lot of material with you, and you have seen that many doctors will say that since there are no clear rules and regulations, therefore we are also very confused whether we should administer death or not. So there has to be very clear rules and regulations from any country whatsoever, which we are talking about. So this is one thing which they say. The second thing, and it's also a very important thing, that there is no way in which you will be able to check the misuse, right? And the third thing, which is another important thing, is that banning euthanasia completely puts a lot of people in such vegetative states that is intolerable even for the whole of the hospital and the authorities concerning it, right? So, a complete no-no is also a very questionable thing. So, with this, I will like to finish today's lecture and ask you to think more on these things, that what is it which we should debate about, whether we should grant euthanasia or whether we should keep euthanasia or we should completely ban euthanasia, or what are the arguments for euthanasia or what are the arguments against euthanasia, or whether death is actually a bad thing, or whether euthanasia is having any kind of merit whatsoever, right? So the platform is open for debate and discussion, and we will discuss as soon as the class starts.